knocking on doors. So that's how we're trying to get into some of these underserved communities that look at us like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, so I guess the one final thing I would say about Illinois is that Illinois has a reputation for being a very corrupt place for government. Well deserved in some instances. We have a history of our governors going to prison, for instance, but the current one hasn't gone to prison yet, and the previous one didn't go to prison. Go back one more from that, and yes. I think a lot of the sort of machine party politics that happened, especially in Chicago, are sort of fading out. I wouldn't say they're gone. I think in some instances, Dan Lipinski beating Marie Newman in the 3rd District primary race seemed to have been driven some by sort of machine politics. But I think that some of that is starting to lessen. I think the corruption probably is no longer as bad as people think of it as being, no worse than anywhere else in the country. But it does have that reputation, and we have had sort of a governor to prison pipeline for a while. Jessica, did you want to say a little bit about the kind of events that you guys have going on if people are in the Metro East area?
Sure. May 27th, we are actually having a celebration, a convergence rally. We're stronger together, and it's basically all our allies that have joined up with Metro East and who want to get involved. We're going to celebrate, network, and we are going to have also June 16th is Juneteenth. It's Emancipation Day, Second Independence Day. We are actually getting a table, and that's where we're going to be doing the state IDs, helping people, empower them. We're helping the community. That's going to be a big celebration. They just got the state to pass it as a state holiday, and they're working on getting it to becoming a national holiday. So we have that going on. But the closest thing we got is May 19th. We got both the J.B. Pritzker governor and our congressional folks doing a day of action. So they're offering training, and it's kind of nice seeing people talking to each other, and we're doing some things that are different this time. We're not repeating a lot of the same mistakes. So we're still learning, but I'm glad to see a lot of changes. And some of these events that we're doing together is just proof.
I have, by the way, reached out to the Pritzker campaign twice to try to get them on the podcast with no response. So if you are listening to this from the Pritzker campaign, we would love to hear from you.
In Carbondale, Thursday at 6 o'clock at Pagliai's, we're going to actually have Brendan Kelly visiting Indivisible Carbondale, and it's open to the public. At 6 o'clock, he's going to have a question and answer session. And so we're hoping that's going to be very informative to everybody in the local community. And then on June 1st through 3rd, we're really excited. Carbondale's going to have their first full-scale Pride Festival, and it's going to be in downtown Carbondale. So we hope many of the local people will come out to that. It will be along the same, scale as Metro East Pride Festival. So we're very, very excited about that and expecting to see some representatives there as well and some candidates.
For anyone who is in Chicago, Indivisible Chicago does a lot of their work through neighborhood groups. But if you go to the Indivisible Chicago Facebook group, you can find out what's going on in the different neighborhood groups. So Southside has a group, Lincoln Square has a group, I believe. There's a Gold Coast group. So, wherever you are within the city, it's easy to find groups that are doing things. There's a lot of things like registering voters that are happening sort of constantly.
Do you have trouble getting out of bed? Start your day with Up in 10 Club, the podcast that gets you out of bed in 10 minutes. With me, Jaslyn, your morning toast. Whether you're snuggly, depressed, anxious, or just too lazy to get up, you're welcome in the club. It's the motivational podcast that doesn't ask too much. This is your 10 more minutes. Listen where you get podcasts and on YouTube. Be our friend on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at Up in 10 Club. Please subscribe or tell a friend.
Hi everyone, this is Kelly, and in this segment I am here with Lauren Underwood, who is running for Congress in the Illinois 14th District. Hi Lauren.
Hi, so good to be with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on. So I have to tell you, we just recently did an episode where we had our listeners call in and leave voicemails about how they got involved in politics. And we had a listener call in and say that he and his wife and kids saw you speak at the Science March, and they got so excited about your campaign that they've never been involved in politics now, and now they are.
I love that. I'm pretty sure I know who they are. That's so nice. They have the best signs.
Oh, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and why you're running for Congress now?
Sure. My name is Lauren Underwood. I'm a registered nurse from a town outside of Chicago called Naperville. My family moved to Naperville when I was 3 years old. And back then it was sort of this farm town transitioning to become a super suburb. And I loved living in this community. When I was in third grade, I got diagnosed with a heart condition. And it's well controlled, but it's a rapid heart rate. And so I had to go to see my cardiologist pretty frequently. And my trips to the cardiologist inspired me to have a career in healthcare, and I decided to become a nurse and used my career in nursing to work to expand coverage for communities across our country. So first by working to implement the Affordable Care Act, so like those private insurance reforms that make coverage more affordable and accessible to families, improving healthcare quality in the Medicare program, and then preventive services, those free screenings and immunization programs, those free contraceptive coverage opportunities under the Affordable Care Act. Then joined the Obama administration and worked in public health emergencies and disasters, things like Ebola and Zika and the water crisis in Flint. It was during our time in Flint that the election happened in 2016. And I thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win and that we'd have an opportunity to hand off our work on health reform and on Flint to a team that cared and wanted to continue forward our progress on healthcare. But instead we got the Trump team who made it really clear pretty immediately that they wanted to take away healthcare from the American people. And that's not why I became a nurse or began doing this work. So I knew I couldn't stay in government and help them do that. So I decided to return home to Illinois, a state that expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, and found myself last spring at my congressman's one and only one public event of the year. It was a moderated question and answer session hosted by a local chapter of the League of Women Voters. And that night, our congressman made a promise. He said he was only going to support a version of Obamacare repeal that let people with pre-existing conditions keep their health care coverage. Now, as a nurse, I know how critical that is for people to have access to medications and procedures if they need it, particularly if they have a chronic health condition. I told you about working on the Affordable Care Act. So I've read the law. I know that it works. I know that we can fix what doesn't work. We don't have to throw the whole thing away. And I told you about my heart condition. So like so many Americans, I have what's considered a pre-existing condition. So when he made that promise, I believed him because it was personal to me. And then our congressman went and voted for the American Health Care Act, the version of repeal that did the opposite, made it cost prohibitive for people like me to be able to get health care coverage. And I was upset. I wasn't upset because of the vote itself, because Randy Holtgren, our congressman, has voted to repeal the ACA dozens of times at this point. But I was upset that he didn't have the integrity to be honest with us the one time he planned to show up and stand before our community. And that's not what a representative is supposed to do. A representative is supposed to be transparent about their votes and accessible to the community. They're supposed to be honest with us. And he's just unwilling or unable to do that. He doesn't have integrity. And so I said, you know what, it's on. I'm running, and launched the campaign in August of 2017, and then just won our primary election in March, where I beat 6 guys with 57% of the vote.
That's great. And so I live in Chicago, and I know a fair number of people in the 14th District, and everyone I've talked to has just been so excited about your campaign, which shows having won such a crowded primary with 57%. That's really great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And, I think that this message about healthcare is so compelling right now. It's something that's really dividing the Democrats and Republicans in meaningful ways right now. And it's so important to so many people. So can you talk a little bit about the kind of work that you were doing with the Flint crisis, and what should Congress, what should our government be doing in regards to situations like that?
Sure. You know, it's so interesting. I think that politically, maybe Democrats and Republicans are divided on how to approach healthcare, but what I hear in the community is that folks are pretty resolute in the need for affordable coverage for their families. And they want looking for stability to know that next month or in 6 months when they're scheduled to have a procedure, that they're going to have coverage to be able to pay for that. And so that's a pretty universal theme. And so some of the politics, I think, are getting in the way and really drowning out the voices of families who are just looking to live healthy and well lives, right? I remember what it was like when we had medical bankruptcies in this country and when people were a cancer diagnosis away from everything falling apart. And now, you know, what we're hearing from, at least what I hear in the community, is about drug prices and the way that insulin, for example, is completely unaffordable. And so this idea of affordability has been sort of this thread that over time has been challenged, that our healthcare system has not properly addressed. And I think that we are more than overdue for a solution. And I would love for it to be a bipartisan solution because this is an issue that's affecting everyone. So that being said, during my time in the administration, I worked in this disaster response space. And so the agency that I worked for, it was the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response at HHS, Health and Human Services. And we were the primary agency called to coordinate the federal response to the Flint water crisis. So as soon as President Obama declared Flint a federal emergency, we were deployed and we deployed staff from the Public Health Service. We coordinated and really worked with FEMA, worked with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Centers for Disease Control, and all the other resources of the federal government to help that community, help the newly elected mayor, work with the governor's office and all the different agencies across the state of Michigan to respond, make sure they had the resources and could chart a pathway forward to ensure that that community had clean, safe drinking water, had resources to deal with any health consequences to exposure to that lead-tainted water, and make sure that they had a process by which to interact with government in a trustworthy way, right? So we recognize our role as federal responders as the folks that could help the people, right? Because this is a community that had lost faith in, to a certain extent, both their local and their state government. And so we needed to be those actors that could be fair and honest and that folks would trust both our findings and recommendations.
That's really interesting, this idea that people have lost faith in government, and that makes a lot of sense thinking about Flint, and it also echoes back what you were saying about losing faith in your own representative who said one thing and then voted a different way. How do you think that we regain the trust of the American people in the government? Let's say we do have the blue wave that a lot of us are hoping for in the fall, and we get a wave of really committed people in office, in Congress, people with integrity who want to do the work. How do we then convince the American people that they should once again have faith in government, in our institutions?
Yeah, I think that this is like the core question. And what it boils down to for me is both accessibility and accountability. I am someone who is from this community. I spend all my time in this community talking with families to understand what their needs are and to try to think about solutions to improve the quality of their lives. So much of what's happened in Washington is so far removed from the day-to-day life of families across Northern Illinois and across our country. And what we're left are these negative results and representatives who don't want to talk to us, who are not responsive, and who are physically absent from our community. And so the idea of the House of Representatives, which is the people's house, to have a voice in the decision-making, I think has largely been lost. And one of the stories of this election cycle is that the average everyday American who has recognized the role and core importance of the role of citizen is now being activated as either an activist, leading groups, being more closely in touch with their elected representatives, and even running for office.